Um, so I I was a bit unsure how to approach this. A career in acoustics. Career is a strange word these days. I'm not sure if we really know what a career really means. So I just decided to illustrate it really with a brief example, and and the old snakes. Is there anybody here who's never played Snakes and Ladders? Okay, so no hands have gone up here in the room. So I'm hoping that this is actually going to mean something to people. So I thought I'd actually just run through and basically what I've done in my career, and that might give people a little bit of a clue about what can happen in acoustics. So why am I here? Because Simone asked me principally, but I have worked in acoustics for 35 years. I think I've worked. Some of my employers might think differently. So what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to talk very briefly about my education. Then I'm going to talk about consultancy because that's what I've done really for the majority of my career, and that's going to be very different to the previous two talks, which have been much more research based. I'm going to talk a little bit about how careers can diverge for various reasons, and a little bit about surviving and thriving. So that's a theme that I'm going to try and work in. How am I going to do that? As I mentioned before, I'm going to illustrate it by my wanderings through a career in acoustics. So I'm going to look at the jobs that I've done. I'm going to talk a little bit about the company, how I got the job, what I did, and why I changed jobs. So education, pretty classic in acoustics. I did a BSc at Salford in electroacoustics, and I graduated in 1987, and that will become important as we go through the timeline. I then went on and did an MSc in acoustics, again at University of Salford, while I was working. So my employer very kindly paid for it. So is that working? Yes, it is. So job number one, building design partnership. They're a medium-sized multidisciplinary building practice. Now, they then had a very small acoustics team. When I joined, I was number 3. They're now a very big and very well-respected acoustics consultancy. How did I get the job? Well, I was kicking around at the university because I didn't really know what to do with myself. And one of the lecturers said, oh, BDP are looking for somebody, go and talk to them. He also, I'm very pleased that he actually gave me a little bit of advice. He said, if they ask you questions about things you know nothing about, say, I don't actually know anything about it, but I'm really interested in finding out. So that was very, very good bit of advice. So I'm not quite sure how I make this work. So anyway, there we go. Job. Got my job at BDP Acoustics. What did I do? Well, I had an absolute ball. And I know this isn't going to be everybody's idea of fun, but I did a lot of surveys and I did a lot of calculations. I did building inspections. I crawled around and looked at the bottom of the doors to see if there are any seals. We don't even have doors in this auditorium. For those online, we're surrounded by curtains and the cafe, and lunch is about to kick off next door, I think. I did quite a lot of testing and commissioning, and I really enjoyed that. Sometimes I did testing and commissioning on buildings that I'd actually done inspection work on during the design. And that was always a little bit nail-biting because did I fail to pick something up in the inspections when I was doing those during the building phase? I learned a huge amount from the people that I worked with there. We did a lot of work with a couple of guys from Salford University, David Saunders and Jeff Carey. They taught me an enormous amount about doing measurements well, understanding what standards you need to use for your measurements. And my colleagues there also taught me about the importance of observation. So if you go out and do a survey now, you can have a cruise round on Google Street View, you can have a look at the satellite image. None of that in those days. You've got a piece of paper if you were lucky with the building drawn in relate that you were going to do the survey for that was going to be built, with the roads, and you headed off with an A to Z if you were lucky. And you had to actually go out and find all those noise sensitive receptors or the noise sources that were going to affect your building, and you had to do all of that. So I learned a lot about observation. There's no point in measuring a piece of machinery if you haven't written down what the machinery is, what else is running, how was your machinery running, how fast was it running? So I learned a huge amount in that first job. Probably learned most in that job than any other job that I've done since. I've put on there some of the sort of projects that we worked on. My absolute favourite was cinemas. So multiplex cinemas were a new thing in 1987, and we actually worked to help develop standards that they used for design for them. And I spent a lot of time doing inspection and testing work on them. Why did I choose to move on? I got to a stage really where I really wanted to do more things. I wanted to do some stuff that was a little bit more perhaps a little bit more sort of hardcore industrial noise. So I went to a firm called Vibranoise. Now, Vibranoise were a small specialist noise and vibration company. They don't exist anymore. There were about 10 people there. How did I get the gig? Well, Prof. Lord at the university was working with the company to develop and broaden their business, and he recommended me. So that's great. It's a strange sort of interview in a Chinese restaurant just down the road from here. Bit unusual, but there you go. So the work. So Vibranoise did a lot of work in the oil and gas field. They did a lot of industrial work, work with manufacturing companies, power generation, a lot of work with GEC at the time. They did troubleshooting. They'd go out to oil rigs, work out why somebody's compressor was vibrating, causing a lot of noise or getting damaged. And they did a little bit of building design work as well. Majority of the work that I did there was noise prediction. Computer noise prediction was a new thing then. We did site testing, tested piles. That's my favourite job there, was piles. So somebody thought that they hadn't built the piles deep enough in the ground, so we went out and bolted a huge shaker to them and did vibration measurements on them. Absolutely no idea how we got answers out of that. But anyway, it was good fun. Other things I did, noise at work. So this is going into factories and doing measurements to determine whether or not noise levels are too high and they're going to damage people's hearing. So why did I move on? So I'm going to take a bit of an aside here. So timeline, we're now in 1992. So economy is important if you're a consultant. Consultancy is largely a service sector business. So people build things, they need money to build things. And in 1992, there was a serious recession. So this is the unemployment figures for the United Kingdom from 1983, when I went to university. Good time to be at university, bad time to be employed. Graduated in 87, things were looking really good until we hit the early 90s. And 1 year, 364 days into my employment at Vibranoise, I was made redundant. I don't know whether this is going to work. So things have been going great, been enjoying myself, learning new things, and oh dear, bang, no job. So what do you do? What do you do in this situation? Well, in my case, I phoned a friend, and that friend was somebody that I'd worked with at BDP. And he had been talking to somebody that he used to work with, who actually needed somebody. They needed a senior consultant for their Warrington office. So, if I can get this to work, I went to work for Wimpey Environmental. So they were an environmental consultancy when environmental consultancy was quite a new thing. They had a medium-sized acoustics team, and the sort of work they did was housing projects, because they're part of the Wimpey group, so Wimpey Homes, minerals, another part of Wimpey, and infrastructure, road, rail, and power. So the person that kind of got me the job there knew that they needed somebody, and that the guy that ran the unit there, it was probably the most bizarre interview, I think, bizarre things anybody ever said to me at an interview, which was, some people will tell you that I'm a misogynist. And I thought, well, that's an interesting opening line for an interview. But actually, as it turned out, me and Bill actually got on very well. And he was just a bit old-fashioned, I think. There was no evil intent. So sort of projects that worked on there, environmental impact assessment. So that was actually EIA with capital letters. That was quite a new thing in 1992. I did blasting, noise and vibration work. I think my favourite job there was a blasting damage investigation. I went to look at this fantastic house in Scotland. So I absolutely loved the travelling consultancy. And this guy was convinced it was blasting at the nearby quarry that was causing cracks in his house. And actually it wasn't. It's actually rubbish that all old houses were built better than modern houses. It's just that the ones that are still standing were built better than the ones that have since fallen down. The biggest project I worked on there, and the reason I got the job, was doing EIA work for a new nuclear power station at Sellafield, working for BNFL. And this is a bit of a theme through my career, Sellafield and BNFL. Although I did actually get to go to Sellafield for the first time when I was working at Vibranoise, but that was on a different project there. Why I moved on? Well, the reason they actually employed me in the first place was because there was a stipulation in the contract on that BNFL job that the person managing the EIA work for Noise had to be based in the Northwest. So as soon as the job finished, guess what? Made redundant again. So, bit of a theme, but you've got to, when this sort of thing happens, and it does, and it will, most people will get made redundant at least once in their working life. But hey, I'm still here. So word got out that Joni did the job. I phoned some friends again, talked to people that I knew from IOA meetings, and got a couple of contract positions. And that was quite an unusual thing in those days, doing contract work, actually. So I did some looking at sound insulation for military aircraft hangars up at Wharton near Preston. They wanted to run up military jets inside the hangar. That was a bit of a scary concept. I went off to Scotland and did some survey work on ash lagoons. If you don't know what they are, look them up. They're quite interesting. Then I went to a firm called AVT for 3 months and actually worked on the sister project to that BNFL Sellafield power station I'd been working on. So they were looking at 2 sites, one at Sellafield, one at Chapel Cross. But contract was all very well, but I actually kind of had that bit of a need for security, mortgage to pay and all that sort of thing. So I went to work for a local authority for 3.5 years. That job I actually got because when word was out that Joni did the job, I got a call from an ex-colleague and he said, we're going to need a noise technician at the council. So I thought, well, it's kind of a bit sideways. It wasn't really what I was planning to do, but let's give it a go. And actually, it turned out to be very interesting. It kind of got me out of my shell. I was forced to actually speak to people. That was quite scary. I dealt with a lot of domestic and industrial noise complaints, barking dogs. There's a lot of them out there. Did construction site noise control. So that pictured on the bottom. So when I'm saying construction sites, that's the Second Fellwall Viaduct. So those of you from the northwest, that goes over the Manchester Ship Canal, takes the M6 over. Huge job. Went on for years. And was actually surprisingly noisy. I gave advice on planning applications. So when things go through the planning system, they need noise and air quality and contaminated land advice for the planners. So did work on those, worked on a Royal Mail depot, taking stuff off vans, putting it on trains, all happening in the middle of the night, obviously quite noisy. And my favourite job there actually was working on a thing called Burton Wood Air Base. This was the biggest military air base in the UK, possibly in Europe, I think. It was used in the Berlin airlift. And when it became surplus to requirements, they started parking lorries on it. And these were literally 30 metres from people's houses. And that was a big job and it rolled on for quite a long time. So why did I move on from there? Well, I kind of eventually really wanted to get back to doing more technical acoustics again. So eventually, I will get this to go. There we go. So I went to work for a firm called PDA, Phil Dunbavin. Consultancy at the time, it was quite a small consultancy. There were only 5 or 6 of us there in Warrington. It's actually now quite a big outfit, still going strong. And I was invited to join by one of the directors there, who I'd been on the other side of a industrial noise complaint with when I was working at the council. So there's a bit of a theme here. None of the jobs that I've had so far, and I'm on job number 7, are things that I have got through applying for an advert. So that's worth bearing in mind, I think. So Areas of work at PDA, they did a lot of industrial plants and they did quite a lot of housing schemes, various other bits and pieces. Did quite a bit of troubleshooting for industrial noise control. So going out and where factories either had problems where they had high noise levels and they had noise at work issues for staff, and also for plants where they were causing noise nuisance to the local residents. So that was quite good fun because I got involved in actually looking at the what was needed to fix it, and then talking to the people who would actually design and build the silencers or whatever noise control devices it was that we were going to put in. My favourite project there was we did work for Zurich municipal insurers, and they would insure people who built houses. So if there's a problem with your house that you think was to do with the way it was built, you phone up the insurers from Zurich, and then they get specialists in to come and look at site. And this was a block of flats in Middleton in Manchester where they had an impact insulation problem. And it turned out that actually the floors that had been put in actually didn't really have any impact isolation at all. So that was quite a good fun. Absolutely loved it. It was a great place to work. When we'd been working hard, the boss would take us out, we'd go out to gigs, we'd get out the pub, really enjoyed it. But in the end, I got another offer, and it was an offer that I felt I really realistically couldn't ignore. So got a call from a friend who worked for Arup, and he said that they're setting up acoustics in the Arup office in Manchester. So new millennium, new job. Again, not advertised, snuck in via the back door. For those of you who haven't come across Arup, they are a large multidisciplinary engineering consultancy with a large acoustics team, we used to refer to as AAC. At that stage, they were the biggest acoustic consultancy in the country. Not anymore. They do, as a company, best known for doing building projects and some of the really, really complex building projects that you'll see around the country. Also infrastructure, and they do a lot of infrastructure, but that's not quite as high profile as the buildings. So what was attractive about Arup? Arup had a lot of, apart from having some fantastic projects, they also had a lot of industry experts in all sorts of different fields, and they had offices all around the world. Now, there are things that I've deliberately not talked about that I know that Stephen's going to talk about this afternoon. But one thing that I think it's worth mentioning about firms like Arup and firms, some of the bigger firms like AECOM and WSP and others, have acoustics teams around the world, and there are always opportunities there to actually do secondments, either short term or long term, which might actually get you off to a different part of the world, working in a whole different sphere. And those sort of opportunities are great with firms like that. So what sort of work were Arup doing, and did I get involved with? And innovative is a word that is overused, frankly, these days. But they really did find innovative solutions to complex issues, mostly at the design stage. So it was a lot more design orientated than some of the work I'd done in the past, which would have been more troubleshooting related. We've got a problem, can you fix it, sort of thing. Although we did do that as well. They did a lot of environmental impact assessment. They got involved with some really, really big projects. And also they got involved with some engineering and architectural acoustics design. Projects that I worked on, buildings projects, education, so that's university buildings, health buildings, hospitals, transport hubs. There are a lot of them. I won't talk about all of them. Infrastructure, got involved with infrastructure, and gradually what I did changed, and I'll talk in a minute about why that was. It's really hard to pick out a favourite. I was at Arup for 18 years, and if you've seen from all my other jobs, I was lucky if I ever got to see a project finish before I moved on or was moved on. But I thought I'd try and find a few highlights. This one, the Sound House, it was a new music facility for the University of Sheffield. This is what happens if you say to the architect, well, you haven't got much money, so you might as well just make it a big black box. And he did. East London Line Railway, picture of me looking a bit tired, but very proud. Worked on the East London Line Railway doing right from sort of implementation of some very weird planning conditions, doing ground-borne noise and vibration design for the track, doing noise barrier design along the railway. And then after it opened, that picture of me doing something unspeakable on the bogie of a train. They had some curving noise issues at the depot, and we went to do some investigations on that. That was about 3 o'clock in the morning because it's an operating railway. So the only time we were allowed to actually take the rolling stock out and play with it ourselves was during the night. So economics again. So this one has a happier ending, I shall say, very quickly. So at this point, we are round about here, 2008 financial crisis. So I mentioned consultancy is a service industry. Private investment in building dropped through the floor in 2008, 2009, which meant that there was a real paucity of commercial office design, buildings, new theatres, whatever. But the government invested in infrastructure, and governments tend to do that when times are bad. So I figure working on infrastructure projects is a safe bet. So I went off to work on Crossrail in London. So some European money in there, lots of London money, absolutely fascinating job. The part that I managed was the team looking at the ground-borne noise and vibration control from the track in the central section tunnels. And this is part of our track being put in. The being away from home wasn't so great because I did a weekly commute for about 3 years, and that was actually quite hard work, but the job was great. I did oralisation work for HS2, which was the first time that on a large scale simulated oralisations of high-speed trains have been actually done to present to the politicians and decision makers, but also then we took them on tour around the country at public consultation, which is another thing that as an acoustician I never expected to find myself doing, just dealing with a lot of very angry people. In parallel, and again, Stephen will talk about the Institute of Acoustics a bit this afternoon, I was appointed the president of the Institute of Acoustics, which is a fantastic honour, and I would really encourage anybody to get involved with the Institute. I'm hoping that the Institute will pick up some of the UCAN things as things go forward, and I can't recommend it enough. I also became a chartered engineer. Arup was an absolutely fantastic place to work. I gave it 18 years of my life and a lot of hard work. I learned an incredible amount about a lot of different things from many, many people. But eventually I did decide it was time for a change. So when you work somewhere for 18 years, you can kind of end up taking yourself to a place that actually you're not actually doing things that for you are really new. So I decided to move on, and I went to work for a firm called Wood. So Wood are a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy. They have a large acoustics team, but that's spread all around the world. And it's another of these firms that's grown by acquisition that's not really quite sure where it's going yet. How was I recruited to this job? Over beer. So one of my colleagues that worked with me on the Crossrail noise team had gone to Wood. He was running the team there, and yeah, beer works wonders. They do a lot of work in power generation, a lot of it in clean energy, but also in oil and gas. Although most of the work that I did there was airports, so they were managing the Heathrow expansion project, the noise part of Heathrow expansion project EIA work. Also do roads, railways, and a lot of government-related work. Running a little bit short of time, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about what we did there, but my favourite project there was the Bradwell new nuclear power station. There's a picture of Tom Brooks busy setting up well, I don't know, he's doing something unspeakable to a badger on a stick by the look of it, but so why change? Well, sometimes odd things happen in life. So I saw an advert This is a bit out there for me because, as you've noticed, none of the jobs that I've had before I've ever got through applying to a job advert. So what do? There was an advert, and it was looking at the noise attenuation from hedges, which I've spent 35 years telling people is absolutely nothing. And I couldn't resist it. So I actually did an application. I actually did a job application, which was a bit nerve wracking. And I had an interview with Trevor, which was even more nerve wracking. And I got the job. So I'm now back in academia again now. So I just wanted, can I take a couple of minutes and we do questions later? So I just wanted to do a couple of slides about trying to work out what you do in a career in acoustics. I think it's really important to understand what motivates you. You're going to hear about people doing research today, people doing consultancy, people doing one and then the other and then going back because they can't make up their mind like me. If you go and do kind of like career coaching, people will talk about motivations, although I think they call them anchors now, but I think that's just management speak, really. And they've broken them down into these things that I've put on the bullet points here: excellence, security, stroke stability, pure challenge, creativity, service, lifestyle, and autonomy. And I would really encourage you to have a think about which of those things actually describe well, I've put what describes you, but I think what I actually mean here is what describes things that actually make you get out of bed in the morning. What are the things that actually you will strive for in a job? And I would have a careful think about those when you're going, when you're doing a job application, when you're actually writing your CV. It's worth putting across to the person you're applying for a job to what sort of things it is that you're looking for. Because if they know fine well that their job is going to give you no opportunity for creativity, then there is no point in giving you a job. You won't work well for them and you'll be miserable. So it doesn't help anybody. So a little bit of a summary of career in consultancy. It's service industry. It tends to be feast or famine. Currently, it's a seller's market. There are more jobs than there are good candidates to fill them. But what if things get tough? We keep hearing that there might be another recession, but actually there are a lot of things you can do actually to give yourself a good chance to thrive in a career in consultancy. But some of these are things I think probably apply to other areas of acoustics you could go into as well. Things get tough. Well, you have to have done your homework. Be prepared. You've got to have built those ladders. You've got to have done your pre-work. If it all goes wrong, who would you phone? You need people to be able to phone. Do your networking, maintain your contacts, phone somebody up, say hi, go for a beer, ask them what they're doing. Do they need any help with something? I would really strongly encourage you to do continuing professional development and to build evidence of that. There's plenty of online resources out there. All the videos from UCAN, the IOA have them. A lot of the universities have videos that you can do for CPD on the websites. It doesn't have to be events that you go to in person. Write down what you've done, write down what you've got out of it, and write down what it is that you actually want to do next. So build your ladders, avoid the snakes. Remember, it's a small industry. There are about 3,000 people in acoustics in the UK, and it's amazing how fast you get to know them. Be a trustworthy colleague. Be that person that when you phone a friend, that friend will want to recommend you to somebody. Don't burn your bridges. It's a really, really, really bad idea. The other thing as well is do consider taking a different path to your end goal if you have to. All experiences are useful. And if it really gets bad, phone a friend. There are plenty of friends out there in acoustics. Pretty much anybody in this room you could pick up the phone to. So in conclusion, I'd like to say consultancy isn't for everybody, but if it's for you, it is a fantastic career. Thanks. neatly avoiding the questions. Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, yeah.
Instead of two USB slots. Okay. So I'll do the through that.